We're less than 2 hours away from President Biden's global climate summit. Is Australia now being left behind by the rest of the world as it moves seriously towards addressing climate change? Welcome to Q&A. Hi there and welcome to the program. Joining me on the panel tonight, Whadjuk Noongar woman and Network 10 journalist Narelda Jacobs, the former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, the Minister for Resources, Water and Northern Australia Keith Pitt, Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young, and he's one of the architects of Australia's gas-led recovery and an advisor to the Obama, Trump and Biden administrations, Andrew Liveris. Please make all of them feel welcome. You can stream this live on iView and, of course, all the socials and join the conversation on Instagram and Twitter. Quanda is the hashtag. Please do keep it respectful. We'll get to your questions on climate in a moment, but our first question tonight comes from Stuart Kovacs.
Hi, everyone. This week in the US, former police officer Derek Chauvin, who was responsible for the murder of George Floyd, was convicted on both murder and manslaughter charges. This case establishes an important precedent with respect to police accountability. In Australia, over 470 First Nations people have died in police custody since the 1991 Royal Commission. This is unacceptable. Where is the government's appetite for serious and meaningful structural change regarding how First Nations people are treated by the police? It is woefully lacking.
Keith Pitt.
Well, firstly, thanks for your question. I really want to give a shout out to our police enforcement, our paramedics, our emergency services, because there is an awful lot of them, in fact the overwhelming majority, who are out doing a very difficult job in difficult circumstances, and we should be thankful for what they are doing to keep us all safe. Now, to the premise of your question, clearly that's unacceptable. And in my view, the challenge for all of us starts with our children. We are letting our kids down. The fact that they are coming through the system and ending up incarcerated, in my view, is unacceptable, and I think that's somewhere we need to start. And of course the Commonwealth will always be ready to work with the states and territories when it comes to law and order. But fundamentally, we've got to do better for our kids.
Narelda Jacobs, do you see serious appetite for meaningful structural change here in Australia?
Look, since the 30 years of the Royal Commission, there have been a lot of recommendations implemented, but there are so many more recommendations that could be saving lives and stopping the over-incarceration of Indigenous people. And that is what the Royal Commission was meant to do. It was meant to stop the over-incarceration of Aboriginal people. We are still seeing 10-year-olds locked up when Attorneys General around the country can quite easily raise a criminal age of responsibility to 14. We're still seeing hanging points on cells. We're still seeing officers using discretionary powers where they could be, driving people home, yet they're locking people up. They could be writing a fine for fare evasion on public transport, and yet they are charging people with fraud. These are the reasons that Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people are being locked up. The answer, the reason that there are so many deaths in custody is because there's an over-representation in our prisons, and that needs to stop. And then there were 5 people that died in 1 month alone this year. We didn't hear too much about it, and so I think, as a public, we need to expect more.
But this is things that governments at every level can do to change. The Minister here says the Commonwealth is ready and waiting. Is that what you see?
Well, the discretionary powers alone, officers, they're making split decisions whether to put someone in jail or not, and they're using that in the wrong way, and that's what it comes down to. Stop funneling Indigenous people into prisons. That's what it comes down to. Divert from the justice system. It costs over $100,000 a year to imprison someone. That money can be so better spent preventing in the first place.
Andrew Liveris, you grew up in Darwin, you've worked in remote communities, you must have seen this play out time and time again. Why can't government solve this? 30 years we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, my Territorian roots somewhat qualify me, but my recent experience living and working in the United States and what just happened, the question was based on the George Floyd verdict and what is America learning and has learnt. And America has taken a long time to even understand what racial equality looks like and the incarceration of African Americans in prisons in the United States. I would tell you the business community in America has stepped up because government hasn't. And I would tell you that that partnership and that collaboration actually is already present here in Australia. So I'm quite shocked, as I served on Michael Gunner's Territory Economic Recovery Commission, that the racial profiling issue is still here. Actually, growing up amongst Indigenous people, growing up in Darwin, spent my young life there, a lot of my mates, okay, and I was just with them very recently, having a barbie and a beer, as Territorians are prone to do, and the Aboriginals or the Indigenous people with me were saying this is still something they get profiled on. If they get pulled over, they automatically, just because they're coloured, okay, or they're not white, get profiled. This is happening in America every day. I had a board member, okay, a very senior African American, living in Los Angeles, pulled over in Beverly Hills, driving, I forget the car it was, but an upmarket car, and basically being accused of stealing that car. So racial profiling and unconscious and conscious bias, to truly be a multicultural nation, I've heard Malcolm use that term and I believe it, I've now been here a year. I love the notion that Australia is multicultural and can lead from the front. We need to lead in this issue. We need to remedy it. And I agree with you, Keith, the police are doing a great job, but they need to do a better job in this topic that Narelda phrased.
Yeah, and interesting you say, it is a whole community approach because we need to change attitudes of the entire community. And it's not an Aboriginal problem, it's not a Torres Strait Islander problem, it's an entire community problem.
But why is it, though, the streets burn in America when these deaths occur? That doesn't happen here. There is not community outrage when you hear about a black death in custody in Australia. What's the difference?
Well, I'd like to toss it to someone else because I've only been here a year and I don't feel qualified to answer, but I would observe that we're urbanites to a fault. We don't really live in the country. I mean, some of us do, some of us go out there, okay, and I don't see it as an urban problem. I may be wrong. I mean, Malcolm, your dear spouse.
Look, what is the difference? Why are we not all outraged every time there's a black death in custody?
We're two different countries with different histories. There are, overlaps, but I mean, the George Floyd murder was George Floyd was murdered, and he was murdered essentially on television. Yeah. It was filmed in real time, so. It's everyone saw it. It's a most staggeringly cruel, reckless, wrong act, and the whole nation erupted, and it's not hard to see why. Look, I think the thing just to go back to what Narelda said. I mean, the reality is the prison system, the justice system, the law enforcement system, is just one aspect of a problem of social disadvantage. You are not going to address problems of social disadvantage and social inequity by putting people in jail, right? That will only make things worse, okay? So you need to have thoroughgoing coordination. You need a plan. I'll give you an example. Tennant Creek's obviously a community, pretty tough community in the Northern Territory. I went there and agreed, while I was PM, on a plan, essentially modelled on the city deal concept I developed, but for a regional area. And the idea was to get everybody involved, Indigenous leaders, Indigenous community, police, social welfare, health, NGOs, get everybody around the table and actually work together to address those problems. Now, that gives you your best chance. But one of the problems you have in a lot of these areas of where you're dealing with social disadvantage is that you have people and agencies, government and non-government, and different layers of government, with the best will in the world, okay, working like ships in the night, just passing each other as ships in the night and not actually collaborating. So one of the critical things is to get people to work and focus. And if I could just finish there. So the person that took the lead there was a young woman police officer who, on her own bat, got out and developed an Excel spreadsheet, and she actually started tracking the way all the various agencies were dealing with young people. We were focused on kids, you know, juvenile social justice problems. And you know what? Nobody, none of the higher-ups, none of the agency heads were doing it. It was one young woman using her initiative, and that provided the inspiration for the collaboration I undertook.
Let's take our next question. It's a video from Lewis Peachy in Malanda, Queensland.
Mr Turnbull, following the Uluru Statement and the Referendum Council report back in 2017, you repeatedly asserted that having a third chamber or an assembly would be contrary to our democracy. However, neither the word chamber or assembly was used in either of those documents. You made this up. Because you assumed a request that we never made, this completely derailed the process of seeking recognition. Mr Turnbull, why did you just fabricate this?
Well, look, the Noel Pearson, who, as you know, was the main spokesperson for the Uluru Statement for the Heart, and you're right, the questioner is right. The Uluru Statement from the Heart is a piece. It's a piece of poetry. It is a beautiful piece of evocative poetry.
You rejected it.
No, but the point is, I agreed with it. I totally.
So why did you reject the proposal?
Because what we're talking about, the proposal that my government said we did not agree with, which we rejected, I suppose, was the proposition that there would be an advisory chamber or assembly, you know, committee, whatever you want to call it, council.
No mention of assembly in the document.
No, but Hamish, you can't live. We can't ignore the reality that was what the proposal was.
Sure, we can't ignore the details either.
No,
and I'm just
no. You are ignoring the details. With great respect, the Uluru Statement was a statement of heartfelt passion for recognition and a voice. Okay, the concrete manifestation of that, as set out by Noel and as presented to us, was that there should be an assembly, a council, an advisory body, which would be elected solely by and composed solely by Indigenous Australians. Now, my view and the view of my government was that, and this would be entrenched in the Constitution, was that all of our elected constitutional bodies should be open to all Australians. And so it was essentially me, insofar as I was expressing my views, but it was the decision of Cabinet, my very strong small r Republican views that the only qualification you should have to be elected to a public office or a representative body in Australia is to be an Australian citizen.
Narelda,
so that's the reason.
Is that how you saw it?
Look, the Uluru Statement from the Heart gathered elders from all over the country, and that was the consultation that you needed to be able to have an enshrined voice to Parliament, for the enshrined voice to be protected by the Constitution, because self-determination is the only way that we're going to close the gap, because it hasn't been done yet, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people know what's best for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The other, I think, indirect benefit of having an enshrined voice to Parliament, as dictated by or requested by the Uluru Statement from the Heart, is that First Nations people are the heart and soul of this country. And I think Australia will agree that Canberra and Parliament House has lost its soul. And by having a presence, so having a physical presence in the halls of power in Canberra, will bring back the heart and soul that it desperately needs.
Sarah Hanson-Young?
Well, we've just had the first Aboriginal woman elected from Victoria to join our party room, Lydia Thorpe. And I must say, the injection of her soul,
yes,
her wisdom, her passion, and her determination to have the rest of us reckon with the truth has just been phenomenal. The conversations that we are having in our party room around everyday issues that we're debating, are presented and debated even already, even just with one extra person in our room, in a different way, in a more holistic way. And I can only speak from that experience, but if that is of a group of 10 of us, imagine the impact if we had more First Nations people elected to our parliament and in our parliament. I think above all else, and Lydia is extremely passionate about this, and we have to be listening to First Nations people much more. Their voice is essential in all of this. And when we, whether we're talking about how Australia is responding to the incarceration rates of young people, sure, let's take some government reviews and advice, but actually let's listen to the mothers of the young Aboriginal men who are being locked up for petty crimes. Let's listen to the children of the mothers who are being locked up because they didn't pay a parking fine. There is so much we have to reckon with. And, I'm a true believer in a treaty. Yes, we need a voice, but we desperately need to reckon with the truth.
Yes.
And we need to, and I say that as a white Australian. I wasn't taught the history of this nation when I was in school. And I went to school with lots of First Nations kids. I grew up in East Gippsland. There was a mission only 20 k's down the road. We weren't taught about their history. They were led into the classroom and we didn't even talk about their culture, and they were living with us. They were my friends. We learnt together, but we didn't learn anything about their culture, and it's time we did.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next question tonight comes from Madeline Johnston.
A couple of days ago, Scott Morrison mockingly claimed that net zero will not be achieved in the cafes, dinner parties and wine bars of our inner cities. This reflects a dangerous and persistent trend where the climate crisis is framed as an issue of identity politics rather than as a scientifically proven existential threat. The rest of the world is rapidly waking up to this reality. So when will Australia follow?
Keith Pitt.
Well, thanks for your question. And the cafes and wine bars of regional Australia are pretty good too, I've got to say. We've got plenty of people out there that utilise those facilities. But
So why target people that live in the cities?
Well, look, the Prime Minister makes his own comments, and as I do.
But do you think he was making fun of people that live in the cities?
Well, the point I want to make is quite simply this. It is
He
the
does,
people
but he
in
can't say it.
It is the people...
Helping you out, mate.
And I was actually going to defend you on the last question too, because that was how I read it. I wasn't in the cabinet at the time. Yeah. But look, back to the fundamental point. This is about who pays. And who pays is regional Australia, because they are the ones that rely on the mining sector, the gas sector, the agricultural sector, our big exporters, our intensive industries in terms of where we deliver our products right around the world. Now, the people I represent, they have one of the lowest per capita incomes in the country. It's about $32,000, $33,000 a head per year. And every time I step into the parliament and I step into the cabinet, they are first and foremost in my mind about what I do for them. And that is a critical piece of why I go there. And I've got to tell you, they can't afford to pay and they will not pay anymore. So we need to take an approach which is balanced, which is based on technology, which doesn't leave them behind, which ensures that the cost for them is not something they can't afford. And that is the position I've always held, and I'm sure Malcolm's well aware of that. And we've had these discussions many times over a number of years.
Well, they can't afford a dead Murray-Darling Basin either, and a dead river. They can't afford our country on fire every few years because of dangerous climate change. And we have to get realistic about the fact that climate change is here, and it's here because we have polluted the atmosphere, and we have to stop polluting. We have to get out of fossil fuels, which is making our planet sick. And I know, it's hard for you, Minister, because you've got the portfolio, you come from that area, you've been given this job from the Prime Minister. What he said about trying to divide the cities and the countries is just lazy politics. It is not, this issue is not going to be won and dealt with by dividing the nation.
Yep.
You know, a real leader actually brings people together, educates, leads, and actually speaks the truth. And every time the Prime Minister talks about climate change, his weasel words ring out. He is he never speaks the truth.
Was
if
it
he spoke
identity
the truth,
politics?
if he spoke the
was
truth...
it identity politics at play, is the question asked?
Yeah, totally. That's what Keith couldn't say, but the fact is, it was a.
I'll make my own
no, I'm just looking after you.
But there is a divide in the region,
hang on.
right?
No, listen, Keith, we understand that, but the bottom line is this: the questioner was absolutely right. An issue of physics, i.e., the impact of greenhouse gases on global warming, has been turned in Australia and in the United States, here largely by right-wing politics, Murdoch media and the fossil fuel lobby, into an issue of identity or values or belief.
Yes.
It's nuts. Saying you believe or disbelieve in global warming is as intelligent or sensible as saying you believe or disbelieve in gravity. So we've got to stop the ideology and the idiocy, focus on engineering and economics, and make this transition to the clean energy economy we need. And
where does Keith Pitt fit in this then?
Keith, but listen, hang on, just let me answer this. Keith, seriously, you are, don't want to be personal at this, but the views you're expressing are abandoning people in regional Australia.
Oh, it's setting them up for failure.
Absolutely setting them up for failure. I mean, we have got, here in New South Wales, there's a by-election in the Upper Hunter, right, in Upper Hunter Valley. The John Barilaro, the Deputy Premier of New South Wales, wants to have unconstrained, open-cut coal mining, cutting up that beautiful valley with, you know, horse breeding, agriculture, cattle, you know, every form of wine, you know, vineyards. He wants to keep...
This is up near where you've got a farm.
Yeah, you did, absolutely, that's right. I've had for many years. But the point of the matter is, we know that the demand for coal is going to decline. It has to, otherwise we're in a lot of trouble. And we know that's going to happen. And what are we going to do? How much more of our great country are we going to just throw into the maw of the coal industry? And what will be left? No jobs and no future. We've got to make that transition for the sake of the regions. And we can have the strongest regions with cheap, affordable, clean energy and great jobs, but we've got to stop the denialism.
You've got to give me a chance to respond.
Briefly, if you could, I want to move on briefly.
Very briefly. Malcolm, that's not the numbers I've got. Demand continues to increase. But once again, we are talking about... Hang on, I'll give you a go.
Keith.
We're talking about fuel. Once again, we're talking about fuel, not emissions. Now, the numbers are straightforward. 19% reduction since 2005 levels. So we've actually outstripped Japan, New Zealand, Canada, the US. We've done better than all of them in terms of emission reductions. And why can't technology be utilised for the resources that are in Australia, which are gifted to the Australian people for their benefit? Now, whether that is gasification, whether it's CCS, whether it's combined with hydrogen or gas, doesn't really matter because emissions come from the back end.
Do you think we have to reduce pollution?
Oh, it's crazy.
Well, we're doing that now.
Well,
we're not.
We're
It's
not.
not true.
Well, 19% reduction. So Alan Finkel was wrong today.
The US has just announced that they're going to double their reduction targets by 2030. The UK is going to triple what Australia is doing. We are left in the wilderness here.
And yet we're in front.
It is. You are crazy.
This is bonkers.
It is
Seriously,
absolute bonkers.
Alan Finkel today, 19% reduction since 2000.
Let's just
It's crazy.
I want to bring Andrew Liveris in.
Fairyland.
Just as we've gone to air tonight, most of our studio audience won't know this, but President Biden in the United States has just announced a new emissions target. The US is going to work to reduce emissions by up to 52% on 2005 levels by 2030. Is Australia now left behind?
Look, I'm totally gobsmacked at the politicisation of this discussion in Australia and the extremism of it. I think I'm the only engineer on the panel.
Not
so
true.
Are you an engineer too? Yeah. I grew up in...
And you both love fossil fuels, so I don't know what that proves.
That is absolutely totally... I got told that you can intervene any time. That's wrong, and I can show you why in a minute, OK?
Yeah.
But before I answer you...
You're the gas man. What are you talking about?
I am an energy policy man.
Oh.
which is all of the above. Do you know what that means? That means what President Obama did. Okay? What President Obama did, I don't know if you are pro-Obama or not, but what President Obama did was he read a book I wrote, and I'll send it to you, called Make It in America, that had an energy policy that was all of the above. So the extremism of the conversation, as just shown, is wrong. You actually have to put it all in place. And if you don't put it all in place, you'll never get the emissions reductions on a sustained basis. You'll get it as economies go up and down, as we've just seen in COVID. So you're meeting targets falsely. So you actually have to have trajectories and plans.
I want to be clear on this. What should Australia's target be, in your view?
We should be net zero by 2050, absolutely.
Should we be more than that?
We should be more than that.
What should we be then?
OK, so I would like the Alan Finkel Technology Roadmap Plan. I would like to see coal defined in its 3 forms, not just 1 form. I'd like us out of thermal coal as fast as we can, low grade. But I don't want the Chinese building all thermal coal while we get out of it. So we've got to enable a transition. And the word transition may be a strange one, but it's a transition that enables us to do the 4 things well. And if you know the 4 things, great. If you don't know them, I can talk about them now. But President Obama put these in place, OK? Now, I was very vocal against President Trump when he abandoned Paris. In fact, we and 100 CEOs in America wrote a letter and published it in the New York Times and the Washington Post. I'll send it to you if you're interested. Basically saying that the US should not leave Paris. And Malcolm knows I did this, okay? So the US business community has got a plan. And President Biden is now putting that plan in place.
Yes, so this is where I want to draw you back to Australia, right? Because there is no clear commitment on 2050. We
should absolutely have it.
Should we, though, commit to net zero before 2050? And when should it be?
I don't have a great answer to that because I don't know the Australian inputs as well. This is an input question and then an output question. Now, carbon sequestration is very key to this. That was announced just yesterday.
But business, just so we're all clear, business needs a clear commitment to a target of net zero by at least 2050.
Totally, totally. And the entire Australian continent needs that because of the effects of climate. I don't deny that. I absolutely, totally believe in climate science. I've never said anything opposite that.
But Andrew...
But we need a migration plan that doesn't kill parts of the Australian economy.
But Andrew,
that's the part that unfortunately the theory doesn't address. We need a pragmatic plan that enables us to put hydrogen in place, to put batteries in place, to put another snowy hydro in place, to absolutely totally put pipelines in place, to use fossils not as fuels but as feedstocks. 95% of the stuff you consume, your house, your car, what you wear, what you walk on, is based on carbon. You can't get carbon out of the economy. You cannot. And if you want the engineering around that, I'll show it to you.
So to do all of this, do we need a price on carbon?
I told 4 things. The 4th was a price on carbon.
So you believe we need that?
I'm a total supporter of that. I worked for President Bush and President Obama with a team of business people doing US CAP. Go look it up. It's an emissions trading scheme that the Europeans put it in place.
OK, so you're on the COVID Commission. You've designed this gas-led recovery. You say we need a price on carbon. Keith Pitt, your response?
Well, firstly, I'm just assisted with some of the gas-led recovery. I mean, there's a lot of that still going on, which we are doing with Angus Taylor and others. And once again, I mean, anyone can announce something and then pretend they know how to do it. This is about ensuring that the technology...
Sounds like what the Prime Minister does every day.
It's about ensuring that there is that we know the path, how much it's going to cost and who's paying. Now, that hasn't yet been established. Now, if you talk about the UK, well, the UK has a nuclear industry. They're tapped into France. They can utilise nuclear energy, which is 0 emissions. We don't have that option in Australia. Gasification is underway using brown coal in Victoria with the HESC plant in combination with our partners out of Japan. There are any number of options which are being assessed and considered. But right now, 60% plus of our energy in terms of electricity is delivered by coal-fired power. It is reliable, it's base load, it is there.
And it's polluting.
There is an absolute need for us to understand the technology, how it will be delivered and how much it costs, and that is not there yet. And
quickly,
I think Andrew
Malcolm
made that
Turnbull,
point.
very quickly.
Can I tell you, all of those numbers, we know how to do this. The cheapest form of generation is renewables, solar and wind, backed up by storage. The gas has a role to play, but a diminishing one as a peaking fuel. Coal has... We've got to get out of coal, and the world's getting out of coal, and the longer we pretend we're not, the more we're putting at risk the jobs and the future prosperity of the people who work in that industry. It is literally telling people in the resources sector lies about their prospects. We have Keith,
Malcolm, there are 200 power plants, either under construction or under design, and there is demand for Australian coal because it's high
this
quality,
is a fantasy.
it's efficient, we can deliver it efficiently, and that's why people buy it.
Do you read the news? I mean, have you noticed what's going on in Washington? I mean, seriously. Seriously, Keith, what are you doing? Are you just reading the Daily Telegraph and watching Sky News? I mean, is this some kind of coal-hugging bubble? It's literally nuts. I mean, we talked about the Hunter earlier. There's 250 million tonnes of coal licensed to be able to be produced from existing mines. They're producing 100 million tonnes less, and there are people who still want to open up new mines. This is how mad it is. We need a plan. We've got to approach this rationally, recognise coal is on the way out, and what we have to do is plan that to protect the jobs of people in the industry, but above all, put in the cheaper, cleaner, new sources of energy, which are renewables plus storage and backed up by things like snowy hydro, to create the jobs of the future. Otherwise, we're going to end up with no coal jobs and no new jobs, and that is a disaster.
We've got a question on that very matter. Our next question comes from Peter Rowett.
Good evening. Australia is planning a massive expansion of coal and gas extraction. Given that our major trading partners in the G7 and that the USA and China appear to be coming to an agreement on strong and imminent action on emissions reduction, there is the risk that the world's most powerful economies will not tolerate people like us getting in the way of their unwavering commitment to prevent catastrophic climate change. It would leave Australia's economy threatened if major trading partners find our agricultural and manufactured exports unacceptable due to the contribution of fossil fuels in their production and tax them accordingly. With its commitment to fossil fuels, is the government taking a risky gamble with our future prosperity?
Narelda.
It's going to be embarrassing for Australia at this summit, I think. It's going to be really embarrassing that the rest of the world is going to be saying, OK, so what are your targets? Well, we don't really have targets. What are your new industries? Oh, well, we've got, all these hundreds of millions of dollars that we're investing. Well, OK, what are they? Oh, well, we don't know yet. They're being developed. This is from a Prime Minister who has just alienated pretty much half of the country, or even most of the country, because he's delivered his impassioned plea to the suits of this country. He's really good at rallying the suits. But when it comes to asking all Australians to modify your behaviour, he alienates us because he says it's not you aren't going to change the climate. It's the big end of town. It's the industry. It's the factories. It's the producers of the fossil fuels and the exporters. These are the people that are going to have an impact on climate change. It's not the inner city people who are having dinner parties, who are very worried about your future living in this country. It's, he's saying it's not in cafes and restaurants. It's everyone is worried about the climate in this country. Yeah. Torres Strait Islanders will soon not have a home because their islands are being inundated by water. I mean, for goodness sake, bring the rest of the country on this journey with you. Don't just leave it to the suits.
Yeah.
Well said.
Andrew Liveris, you've promoted this gas-led recovery. Many take the view that you're committing us to fossil fuels for much longer than we need to. Explain it, justify it.
Let me teach you a new term. Fossil feedstock.
Let me teach you a term.
Yeah,
if you believe there's a future in fossil fuels, then you are a fossil fool.
Narelda, thank you. I take it as a badge of honour that you would call me that. Fossil feedstock is all of your modern life. You want to live a modern life, you need a fossil feedstock. You can't get carbon any other way. If you want a chemistry lesson, I'll help you at the back. What you've got to do...
Man,
Andrew,
listen. You're so patronising. Seriously.
Let's just try and keep it respectful amongst all of us and stick to the policy.
Well, I'm not the one shaking my finger at people, mate.
Folks, let's just keep to the policy if we can.
Well, you're yelling.
Why is it that Australia needs a gas pipeline, for example, across the Nullarbor to bring it to the East Coast from the West? Can you just justify this promotion of a gas-led recovery?
There's 850,000 Australians employed by industries that use gas as a feedstock. $850,000. At the current pricing levels, they pay Japanese spot price. So Japan gets cheaper gas than we do for our industry. Those industries you need for everyday life. And I'll take the commentary that I'm patronising and I'm yelling because I'm passionate about this, because there's a gap in our knowledge base. I'll buy Malcolm's discussion on gas as a firming fuel anytime. I totally agree with that. Gas as a segue to hydrogen, I also agree with that. That's the fuel part. The feedstock part is not well understood. And it absolutely totally makes me try to understand why is it not understood in this wonderful country of ours. These jobs need to be not only protected, but we need to grow them. So this is sequestered.
So how long do we need gas for as a transition fuel then?
So again, you use the word fuel, okay? And I'm trying to
I
actually
understand the point you're making about feedstock, but
you do.
Ultimately, this is a question that's been put to you about a commitment to fossil fuels longer term.
So remember,
I'm just trying to understand what period you see us using gas as a transition.
The
fuel.
National COVID Commission work we did was for manufacturing, okay? It wasn't for electricity. It wasn't for doing the power balance or any of that. The work we did was totally based on using the carbon for manufacturing. That's the work we did, okay? I have no skin in the game to keep in natural gas for power for anything other than a transition. There's no reason to do that because it is an emitter. It's not as big an emitter as coal, but it certainly is an emitter. So you've got to use it as a transition. That's it. Until batteries become affordable and scalable, until we can actually get more snowy hydros. And why you need a gas pipeline is as much to provide that transition for that, but more for industry, which is why I'm trying to bring it back to the feedstock conversation.
Andrew, where are the 850,000 jobs that use gas as feedstock?
Fertilisers, plastics, chemicals, explosives.
There are 850,000 people working in Australia making plastics,
yes.
Is that right?
Not plastics, all those industries I just said.
I don't think that's true.
That is true.
I think
can
you're
send you the data.
exaggerating. I honestly think you're way out of... You're way off the chart.
Malcolm, I use the same people you use for research. When you were Prime Minister, so go talk to the people in Canberra. I mean, they're the same.
I don't mind you
departments.
mansplaining me. That's all right.
I'm not mansplaining.
You are a bit.
That's a pretty.
It's
cheap,
okay.
That's a pretty cheap look.
It's okay. It's okay. It's all right.
I'm not to bust up the party. Mate.
No.
Why does Australia need gas as a transition fuel?
Well, look, a couple of points. I want to come back to the question that was asked as well around potential for tariffs worldwide. Well, we sign up to free trade agreements. We do multilaterals and bilaterals, and we expect our trading partners to meet the terms and conditions of those agreements. Now, whether it is a border tax or anything else, my view is that is against the agreements we've signed. It's a tariff which they are potentially putting in place, and in my view, that would be against those agreements which have been in place for some of those countries for a very long period of time. Now, to come back to your question about gas, as the electrical engineer up the front, really rough and ready. Solar panels, life roughly, depending on how new they are, 10 to 20 years. Wind turbines about 20, GTs, gas turbines about 20, coal-fired power stations, depending on how much maintenance and changes you do, go for a long period of time. Hydro, traditional hydro, I know of some that are 6 decades plus. So that gives you a bit of a rough idea. Nuclear, my understanding, it's 80 to 100 potentially. So that's just rough and ready about what's going around. Gas is a critical feedstock. It's also critical to our potential success to drag manufacturing back on shore, which I want to see. I want to see more of our resources used downstream in terms of the processing before they leave Australia to go somewhere else. That drives jobs into this country. To do that, we need the fundamentals right. That is the price of gas, the price of electricity, the availability of the skilled workforce. Government needs to get out of industry's way, to be frank, because the cost of doing business here is much higher than some of our competitors. We are politically stable. This is a great place to invest. And I've got to tell you, and I think everyone in the crowd will agree, Australia has done a magnificent job in dealing with the pandemic. There is nowhere in the world you would rather be than here, and industry sees that, and there is opportunities for us across the board. But in terms of pipelines, the challenge is manufacturing is currently not where the gas is. The Bass Strait.
Are we going to build a pipeline or not?
Well, that's being worked on between me and Angus, and of course in consultation with states. It is one of their responsibilities.
$5 billion, would it be worth it, Malcolm?
Well, look. My concern is that we're going to see a classic exercise in industry rent seeking, and billions of dollars of taxpayers' money being transferred to the fossil fuel sector in assets that will be shortly stranded. So I'm really worried about what is what's happening here, because I tell you that you can, you start getting this the fossil fuel sector, the gas industry saying, oh, all we need to make this worthwhile is for the government to build this pipeline and that pipeline and another pipeline. And suddenly you've got a wealth transfer from the taxpayers of Australia to an industry whose prospects are time limited. Now, I do disagree with what Andrew said about jobs, but I just want to make this point. There is no cheap gas in Australia. That's the fundamental problem. And this is, you basically need to have gas, it's measured in a gigajoule, but, it's a term of description of a form, a quantity of energy, if you like. You need to have gas at $4 a gigajoule or thereabouts.
It's a lot cheaper in WA than it is on the East Coast,
yeah,
right?
Yes.
So it's not entirely true.
Yeah, no, but yes, that's true, but the problem is you've got to move things around. And the fact is, whether you've got to move it in an LNG carrier or a pipeline, there's a cost. Now, we used to have cheaper gas on the East Coast, but the cheap gas has been largely exploited. We set up an export industry, which I think was probably a mistake in Curtis Island in Queensland, and we now have expensive gas here. Now, my only point is the gas-led recovery is a slogan, it's not a plan. And that's what the Australian energy market operators' conclusion was. There's been a lot of work done on this, and Andrew's an old friend, but I just have to say I do disagree with you on that.
And I respect that. I respect it.
And I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not. It's not just me that disagrees with you. It's AEMO. It is a lot of people in the energy sector that think this is a fantasy. There are people who got off the COVID Commission, as you know, because they felt it was heading in the wrong direction, and in this sort of gas-led recovery, it is a gas slogan. It's not a plan.
I disagree with that.
$5 billion announced by Santos in the last couple of weeks for a project in the North West Shelf.
Oh.
I think that's confidence.
Let's take our next question. It comes from Ron Hanley.
My question's for Keith Pitt regarding PEP 11, the gas mine proposed offshore between Sydney and Newcastle. I'm a Northern Beaches resident and a passionate ocean lover, and I was absolutely appalled and gobsmacked that there was going to be a gas mine proposed off our coast. Nobody in our coastal communities wants PEP 11 to go ahead. There are federal Liberal and Labor MPs, all local councils. The New South Wales government and even the Prime Minister has stated that he's opposed to PEP 11. Nobody seems to want it. We don't need it. So does the Minister support gas mining off our coast, or will he scrap PEP 11 for good?
Keith Pitt, this decision does rest with you.
Well, that's correct. And look, the first point I want to make is there are probity issues around any of my comments. So there are companies which are ASX listed on which what I say has a direct impact on their share prices. So I'm very cautious with what I say. A little bit of context, that's a petroleum exploration permit. It's managed through the regulator, which I'm responsible for, which is NOPTA. And there is a proposal, and this is long-standing, for an extension of an existing permit off the New South Wales coast. The area is about 4,000 square kilometres. If there was to be an exploration well, it's about the size of a kitchen table. To give you some context, the proposal is roughly 30 kilometres offshore. You can't see it. But this is an industry which has been in place in Australia for more than 5 decades. I make decisions on petroleum exploration permits regularly, 2, 3, 4 times a year, right around the country. It's an important part not only of our economy but our fuel security. And for me, when I make a decision, it's one which is balanced based on the facts that are provided, the advice that I have, what is in the application and what the law says.
Sarah Hanson-Young, in February, Keith Pitt described the permit as a needle on a football field. What would you say on the question of whether this exploration licence should be renewed?
Well, it shouldn't. And this is the whole problem we've got, is that we are facing catastrophic climate change. We've got world leaders tonight gathering, meeting to discuss how we turn this ship around. And one of the fundamental things we have to do is to stop expanding the fossil fuel industry, to stop expanding gas wells, oil wells, coal mines. We have to start leaving those fossil fuels in the ground and transitioning to renewables. Renewables are here. They are cheaper. Solar, wind, battery storage, other storage options are far outstripping now gas and certainly coal, any of those new plants coming on. And it is crazy that we have a situation in Australia where we've got politicians prepared to sign approvals for new coal mines and new gas wells. It is nuts.
Sarah Hanson-Young, given where we're at now, do you regret voting against an ETS in 2010?
In 2010? You mean the CPRS?
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that obviously, and fellow over here talked about the politicisation of this whole debate. And one of the things that I think that has been really missed is that whole period was putting to the Parliament a system that was going to lock in failure on climate change. And what we were able to do was come back with Julia Gillard in that minority government and actually put a price on carbon. And we saw for the first time a real drop in carbon pollution. And I think we need to do that again.
But come on, that moment was a turning point in this nation's history. And the Greens took a decision that put us on a particular path that we've been on ever since. Do you regret it?
No, I understand why you asked the question, Hamish. But we came back and actually put in place world-leading legislation that did its job.
But
and who ruined it?
It helped create the politics
Tony
around
Abbott.
it. But it helped create the politics around it, didn't it?
Oh, come on. I mean, the politics of this issue has dominated for decades. And the reason it dominates is because we've got a few people making a lot of money out of fossil fuels, and we've got a media empire in Murdoch working hand in hand, and politicians who keep taking their political donations. Like, that's why we've got a problem here. It's not because the Greens stood up for the planet and the environment and wanted to put in place a scheme that would work and to reduce pollution. We've got a problem because some people refuse to follow the science. We just heard before from the Minister here how well Australia has done during the pandemic, and we have. And you know why we have? Because we've listened to the experts, we've listened to the science, and we've put in place what they've said. And we've worked together to do that. And I think, we're at a point now, we are in the last decade where we can really make a difference. And you've got our biggest trading partner in China, we've got our most strategic ally in the US, we've got the UK, Boris Johnson, all saying Australia's got to get on the same page here. And I'm
so, but you don't regret?
There's
been a wasted decade, and the Greens played a part in that.
Hamish, I don't regret it.
It's not all
what I
Sarah's
regret.
fault.
Sure. But she's the one here.
No, I mean, look, it's easy. It's a very nice, easy line, but. I'm sorry, we've had Prime Minister after Prime Minister after Prime Minister in this country fail to take seriously the climate threat that faces the planet. And why? Because they keep taking donations from the fossil fuel industry.
And I should at this point point out that we invited 4 Labor frontbenchers onto the program tonight, and none of them agreed to come on. Our next question is a video from Edward Carroll in Brisbane.
The cashless debit card trial in your electorate has been a metaphorical knee to the neck of single parents and disability pensioners, and what many are calling a form of financial abuse. Bundaberg has one of the fastest rising populations of homeless in Australia, and a private company having control over people's finances is unconscionable. With stories of bills being missed and not paid despite having money in people's accounts, how can you support this card?
We should point out that Edward Carroll ran as an independent in the 2020 Queensland election. Before we go to Keith Pitt, Narelda, your view?
So the cashless welfare card, there's a lot of... it's not working. It's not working, and it only creates stigma around it. There's embarrassment around it. There's a lot of shame that goes with this card, and it should be about empowering people to manage and determine their own destiny. like I said before, you know, divert, reinvest, use the same money to stop the welfare kind of handout, that kind of mentality, because that's not the future. No one wants that for their future. We all want to be able to spend the money, our money, however we like. The cashless welfare card does not work.
Does not work, Keith Pitt?
Oh, look, I completely disagree. My electorate is one of the trial sites. We are a different cohort compared to the others. This is for under 35s, only on 4 payments, none of which are the disability pension, by the way. And all of the feedback we get locally from frontline service providers and our Indigenous community members is strongly supportive, because it's made a significant difference. Now,
difference to what?
It makes a difference because there are other services, if that's what you're saying, that it does make a difference, because other services are operating in unison with it. So there's actually, while where the trials are underway, it looks like the card is working. It may well be the other services that are provided to that community that is actually the most effective.
So just to finish, I have the largest trial site in the country. We are not a majority Indigenous location. It is under 35s, and within a short period of time, one of my big challenges is in youth unemployment. Right, it was outrageously high, 27%. Right, that's unacceptable. Within some months, that was down to 17%. The feedback from people who are providing food baskets and a pile of other things. This is very tough policy. Right? I absolutely acknowledge
You're stripping people's autonomy.
But it's tough but necessary, and it matters and it makes a difference. And the people I represent, they want me to do something. And the option, what is the option put up by others, is to do nothing and let this continue. I'm just not up for that. Now, you know, we cop a fair bit of flack, as do others, and I understand that. But if I'm ensuring that 1 kid, 10 kids, 50 kids are getting fed every single week and getting the fundamentals of life, I'm willing to have the fight.
Andrew Liveris, if the data suggests that, is it worth it, stripping people's autonomy away?
Look, I am totally not an expert in this area at all, and so I would like to defer to the people who know something about the subject.
Malcolm Turnbull?
Well, obviously I haven't been in politics for nearly 3 years now, but while I was there, I went and spent a lot of time with several communities where the cashless debit card was being used, and I had very positive feedback about it from communities. I remember one of the most evocative, eloquent speeches I've heard was actually in Kalgoorlie from meeting with Indigenous people there, from a grandmother who spoke about, you know, what the lives that it was saving. So I guess all I'm saying is, between Narelda and Keith, it's complex, people are complex, situations are complex, they are trials, and I think it's really important to get the feedback from them. But in terms of the anecdotal, information I got, it was really heartfelt and actually positive.
So, Narelda, if it is improving the data, if it is getting people into jobs,
there's no single solution.
But is it justified?
Well, no one ever wants a handout. You only ever want a hand up. And this card is all about handouts. And we need to change up the narrative.
The card's basically designed to ensure that people can't spend the money, whatever the welfare payment is that's covered by it, on
80% is quarantined on the debit card. You can't purchase alcohol, gambling products, and with a reduction in cash, illicit substances.
You can't go to a farmer's market.
So that's what it is. So it's
20% goes to your normal account.
I mean, you can say it's nanny state.
Isn't it? I mean, it sounds like the kind of thing that happens in an authoritarian country.
Well, no. Well, look, people are dealing with very raw, desperate, terrible social problems, and it was an idea that was trialled. And I guess all I'm saying is, you asked me, Keith's had his experience of it has been positive feedback. The experience I had as Prime Minister, and it wasn't sort of curated or stage managed, was very positive. But I do recognise there's plenty of criticism. So that's why you need to assess it objectively.
It is only one tool.
Sorry, Narelda. I was just going to say, look, I've had a lot of feedback come into my office about it. We've got cashless welfare card in Sejuna. The Senate has also had to vote on the extension of the card. recently, and the overwhelming feedback that we've had from people who are actually being put on the card is that it is demonising to them. It's shameful. They feel it's discriminatory, and overwhelmingly the vast majority of people on these cards in other places are in fact First Nations. But I must say the thing that I'm mostly worried about right now, Hamish, is what it does to women who are trying to get out of terrible domestic violence situations. I think that it really locks them in, and it's very dangerous for them and their children, and the government is just not looking at that at all.
It's certainly not the advice we've had.
Can I just say that this is a prime example as to why we need to have a voice to Parliament, to be able to give the definitive yes, we can do this, or no, but there are better solutions out there. If I can cast our mind back to some of the history books here, where I come from, Whadjuk Noongar country, traditionally people were born knowing exactly their purpose, exactly where they belong, their identity. Women were equal, if not the leader of their families and their mob. Sister girls, brother boys, non-binary people were all completely accepted as living their purpose. Everybody was born in the body that they were meant to be. You were there because you were meant to be there in the form that you were born, and you were all living your purpose. When the colonisers came and invaders came along, they brought with them the patriarchy, and the symptoms of the patriarchy and colonialism is misogyny, sexism, racism, discrimination, homophobia, transphobia. None of those things existed before the colonisers came. So that is why having a presence and having the visibility in our communities, and until Australians stop saying, I've never met an Aboriginal person, they don't live in my community, then we need to work harder to make sure we see the Aboriginal people that live in your community, because that's when we will change this country for the better.
Yeah.
Our final question tonight comes from Rebecca Clark.
Over the last 4 years, the government has spent $50 million to detain one family, including 2 young girls, which contravenes the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, of which we are a signatory. How can this be justified on either economic or moral grounds, particularly when there is huge support from the community of Biloela and the wider Australian community for them to return home?
Keith Pitt.
Well, firstly, thanks for the question. And secondly, do I feel for them? Of course I do. Do we have tough policies in place? Yes, we do. And the 2 individuals, the advice I have is they arrived illegally by boat separately. They later married. They had children, as many families do, but were advised all of the way that they would be returning home. It's been tested internally, externally, all the way through the High Court.
Is it worth the tens of millions of dollars that we've spent in keeping them behind bars and transporting them around and moving them to Christmas Island?
Well, the alternative is more than 50,000 arrivals, more than 1,000 people lost their life.
Is it?
$11 billion in cost.
Is that what's at stake with
thousands of children in detention, and these are the issues that we've had to deal with. There are no easy issues in government.
That is just not true. That is just not true.
Well, it happened. It's been reported. It's factual.
This family have been to hell and back. And it's time that this country gave them a bit of compassion and gave them a fair go. They did everything right. They, once they got to Australia, because they were fleeing persecution, because they came here as refugees, which, by the way, is not a crime at all. It's totally legal to do. And when they got to Australia, they became members of their local community. They got jobs. They integrated. They became part of a community that loved them. Yeah. And to use them as an example, the Prime Minister has overseen them being ripped out of Biloela, sent over to Christmas Island. There's 2 girls here, 2 little girls. And, the Prime Minister likes to talk about his family. Well, what about this family? And what about their daughters?
Malcolm Turnbull. We are running out of time, so we have to keep this brief. There is a new Home Affairs Minister, Karen Andrews. There is ministerial discretion that is used in all sorts of refugee, asylum, migration cases. given that Australia's crying out for new migrants, given that these people have a community that wants them, is there a case for a different approach here?
Yeah, look, of course it is. I mean, Hamish, there's a lot of discretion with the Minister for Immigration, and all of these policies have got to be, you know, and what Keith says about border protection is you know, I agree with that. We do have a tough policy, and that's how we've kept the people smugglers out of business. But there's a difference between scratching your ear and ripping it off, as my late father used to say, and you need to have a bit of subtlety, you need to have compassion, you need to have some humanity. That family should be back in Queensland, and I hope the Minister takes the opportunity of the change of Minister. She's the new Minister, and she can now look at the file anew, use her discretion and bring them back to Queensland, to the community that wants them, and that would be the right thing to do.
Yes. Well, that is, unfortunately, all we've got time for tonight. I think this panel could probably talk all night. Narelda Jacobs, Malcolm Turnbull, Keith Pitt, Sarah Hanson-Young and Andrew Liveris. Please thank all of them. Well, next week, we are in the Sydney studio. We'll hear from the National Senator Bridget McKenzie, the Shadow Health Minister Mark Butler, and the one and only Courtney Act will be here, joining the panel and performing live. We'll see you then. Good night.